Joining us today from WiLS vendor partner Scrible are Victor and Karen, and joining us from the School District of Menomonee Falls, Emily, Leonard. So without any further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that our presenters can take over.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be here. I know we've done this once a while ago, so it's kind of nice to do a bit of a refresh. So I'm Victor. I'm co-founder and CEO of Scrible, and I know that some of you may know about us or have heard about us, but I'm really excited to kind of give an update and background of who we are for folks that are new to us. But I'm really excited also to hear from Emily, who's actually been using us and using Scrible for a couple of years. And I'm also really excited to introduce Karen, who's new to our team, whose job is really to help all of you find success with Scrible in your schools with your teachers and your students. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the screen share where I'm going to kind of walk you through some background. And, if you've seen us before, you probably see some of the same slides, but I do have a couple of updates that I'm going to talk about. One in particular has to do with kind of a hot topic now, which is ChatGPT, which I know a lot of people are talking about and reading about. So we're going to have something new to say about Scrible with regards to ChatGPT. And then I've got a slide where I just give you a bunch of updates regarding some new things that we built and some new help resources that we built and that we're working on. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen and I can dive in. And then we are going to have me give you the background of Scrible first so that you'll have context and you have some visuals for what Emily will talk about, which is how she actually used Scrible and has been using Scrible in her school. So this will give you kind of like a setup, and then Emily will be able to give you kind of like a peer example of how they've been using Scrible. So for those that don't know us, we kind of describe Scrible as a super app for research and writing. And actually, I always like to do a little bit of a double check just to make sure everybody can see what I'm seeing. So maybe Emily and Karen, if you can give me a thumbs up. Okay. So the slide says Scrible in the middle, and we call it a super app for research and writing. And the reason for that really is that we've kind of built a lot of things under one roof. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it really is meant to be kind of a very comprehensive platform that helps you through the research and writing process. Also at the top, you see that we have kind of logos from the National Science Foundation and the Department of Education. That Department of Ed one is actually new because we just recently, last year, received a new really competitive grant from the Department of Education to build a new type of writing assessment system in collaboration with the National Writing Project. That's a whole new thing that we're working on, which I probably won't get into in this webinar, but we might be able to talk about it at another time. Or if folks are really interested in that, you can let us know and we can kind of tell you about that. But basically, the problem that we've been addressing for some time is that, a lot of our students coming out of secondary struggle with research skills, and they're not necessarily ready for college level writing. And it's pretty well known, and I think all of you know this probably from your own work with students. But what's interesting is that on the writing side, the data that we collected a decade ago is unfortunately still relevant, which is what you see there at the bottom over a decade ago. That's NAEP data that was collected back in 2011. And there was more data collected in 2017, but they never released it because there was an issue with how the data was collected. But suffice it to say, in a lot of the conversations we've had with teachers, with librarians, with district leaders, that everybody sort of believes that, frankly, the situation is not much better than back then, partly because if there were gains that were made, some of them were lost during the pandemic. But this problem sort of continues from your sphere of sort of the secondary and high school arena into the college environment, where college instructors, have complained for a long time about students not being well prepared in these areas when they come to them. And then it actually continues into the workplace, but I don't have that slide in this deck, and I think we'll skip that part of it for now. But it's a pretty pervasive problem. And, what we've really tried to do is work with librarians, with teachers, folks like Emily, to try to really address this problem early on in a student's academic career so that, they can kind of not have these issues and they can be more, kind of be stronger when they get to college and beyond. But as many of you know, this problem got worse during the pandemic, where a lot of this work historically was accessed and assessed by yourselves and by your, peer teachers and other librarians, sort of during class time or when students came to the library face-to-face, right? And of course, I've seen this in person when I've been in classes and I've been in schools kind of observing. And we'll typically see, a student pull up next to a teacher or librarian, and the two of them are looking together at, the student's Chromebook. Or I've been in classes where, teachers and librarians will say, okay, this week we're going to look at, all your sources. The next week we're going to spend 5 minutes with every student looking at your annotations and things like that. And of course, a lot of that just got disrupted because it wasn't possible if you weren't in person, which most folks weren't at some point in the pandemic. And so, those that did try to do this work remotely just find it logistically difficult. And this is kind of unprompted, but when Emily does her presentation, I'd love to hear, whether you were able to use Scribble kind of during the pandemic to do this work remotely, because we've seen that some folks were able to do that were using Scribble, and a lot of folks who didn't have something like Scribble just decided to kind of pull back and really not do as much of this work as they were doing in the pre-pandemic times. But basically what's happened is, because of this sort of pandemic setback, we have students now that for the last couple of years and for the next couple of years are frankly coming into colleges more ill-prepared than they were even in the pre-pandemic times. Now, one of the things that we've seen when it comes to writing and writing instruction is that a lot of teachers say that it's just a really heavy lift, right? Teaching evidence-based writing in secondary is one of the hardest things you do because, frankly, it's just very time-consuming, right? It's not as quantitative as math. There's not necessarily something like a Lexile score, which you have in reading, so that you can help sort of benchmark students and potentially easily bucket them into different categories to kind of personalize instruction better. And so it's just, by the nature of the beast, been something that requires a lot of hands-on time with the student work. And so it's a heavy lift. We've had teachers say, it's kind of it's a beast to manage this process. And then, of course, you've got the folks in higher ed, like you see down at the bottom here, saying that, students just haven't been doing as much as writing nationally as we did, let's say, when I was in class or when I was a student in high school many, many years ago. So without that practice, you have students that are kind of essentially not well prepared, and they kind of struggle, where they might go into a college course, for example, where they could put into a remedial course that sort of costing them money but not credit bearing or helping them progress towards their degree, and sometimes students get stuck in Comp 101 or something like that. And so it's a problem that really kind of goes across K-12 and higher ed, and we would really love to work with all of you to try to nip it in the bud before they head off to college. In the work that we do at Scribble, what we've done is really tried to dissect the workflow to try to understand why this work has been so challenging for educators and for students. And I think, as you all probably know, it's just logistically complex, right? So when a student goes through something like writing a research paper, there's lots of different steps involved. They've got to curate their information sources, annotate them, to find evidence, for example, in those papers or those academic resources, cite those sources, build an outline, build a bibliography, write a draft of the paper, and hopefully they're getting feedback all along the way, just not only on the final paper itself. And so it's a lot of steps, and historically, educators and students have had to cobble together a lot of different tools to help students get through this process. So they might have a standalone citation tool, and then a PDF annotation tool that helps them annotate database articles, for example, or a web clipper or bookmarking service that helps them gather internet research and so forth. And so it is a pretty kind of fragmented workflow, and it leads to scattered work, and it's not always easy for students to sort of stay organized as they're going through that process. And as a byproduct, for teachers and librarians that work with and guide students through that process, it's hard to teach and track students through that process because all the student data and work is trapped in all these different data silos and these different ways of working. And so what we've done at Scribble is really try to address this problem by building a lot of these capabilities under one roof. So that's why we call it, a super app for research and writing. We help students curate, annotate, cite, and write, all kind of in one platform. And so we think of it as a really comprehensive, kind of fully integrated, streamlined solution that really does a lot for the student. And one of the nice things is that when you actually consolidate all the work for the student in one place, it also makes your lives easier, and it makes teachers' lives easier, because then it becomes much easier to actually access the work, be able to and provide formative feedback in real time as it's happening, which is, again, I think, as you all know, not historically how this is done. What I have now that I typically do is I've got a very brief kind of like 2-minute product explainer video that I oftentimes will just show over a screen share and just turn up the volume on my computer so that you can hear it. And usually it works out pretty well. So if everybody's okay with that, I'm going to go ahead and just pause the share for 1 second and tee up the video. And let's see here. All right, here we go. So maybe when I get it started, if Karen or Emily can give me a thumbs up and let me know if it's being heard and easy to see, that'd be great.
Until now, students have had to use multiple separate tools for their research and writing work, making it time-consuming, frustrating, and hard to stay organized throughout the process. Scribble unites this disjointed.
I realize I think I paused the screen share, so I'm going to start that over again. Sorry about that.
Until now, students have had to use multiple separate tools for their research and writing work, making it time-consuming, frustrating, and hard to stay organized throughout the process. Scribble unites this disjointed workflow by bringing everything together under one roof. It's a super app for students, educators, and librarians to curate, annotate, cite, and write. With Scribble, curating information is easy. Scribble saves web pages, PDFs, and database articles instantly to a cloud-based library with just a click of the Scribble Chrome extension. You can also add files like PDFs from your desktop and Google Drive. You can richly annotate articles directly in the browser and even collaboratively annotate with others in real time. Citations are generated automatically. Scribble pulls citation information from articles and books and instantly displays the properly formatted citation. The Scribble library stores a wide variety of file and information formats. Stay organized by using full text search and tags to find articles. Scribble also empowers the writing process. Quickly generate an outline by dragging and dropping quotes and comments from your Scribble library. In Google Docs, the Scribble add-on allows you to access your library so you can easily insert your outline and bring your evidence, comments, and citations into the paper while automatically updating your bibliography. Scribble is deeply integrated with Google for Education, including roster sync and assignment integration with Google Classroom. Scribble also offers rich analytics for tracking student progress in real time. Quickly see which students are struggling and where they're stuck. Scribble centralizes student work, making it accessible in one place and enabling educators to easily provide timely feedback throughout the entire process. For students, Scribble frees up valuable time wasted on manual and mundane tasks for higher level learning, like reading critically for quality evidence and crafting strong arguments. For educators, Scribble enables personalized instruction for close reading, research, and writing. Sign up for a free account today and see what Scribble can do for you.
All right, so hopefully everybody was able to hear and see that okay. I'm just going to go back to the presentation. So the video was made for a very googly audience. And so if you use Google, I think it'll suit you well. But I just want to be clear that if you are a district or a school that uses Microsoft stuff, that's okay. We are actually equally partnered and integrated with Microsoft. And there's actually a slide here in a minute or a couple of minutes that I'll show you that talks about that. The other thing about the video is it tends to be heavily focused on the student side of things, but it doesn't explain as much about the what you all would see and what sort of teachers that you work with would be able to see. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and talk about that because I think that's a really important part that of a gap I should fill in. What you see here on the slide right now is the analytics piece, and that was talked about a little bit in the video, and I'm going to kind of talk about that some more. But what's not in the video and not on these slides is actually the way that kind of the assignments work. And I'm just going to speak to that really quickly. When you create an assignment in Scribble, we spawn what's called an assignment library for every student for that assignment. And so what that does is it basically creates a place for all the different elements of the student's work to get saved as they're going along through the writing process. So for example, there's a sources tab where all of your articles are saved. You actually saw that in the video. There's actually an annotations tab where you can actually see all the notes and highlights that you made across all those articles or all those sources in one view. So the analogy I've been using to kind of make it clear what the difference is between the sources tab and the annotations tab is to give you the analogy of like in the analog world, we used to print articles out and put them in manila folders. And that's kind of a way that you would organize, things at the article level. So that's kind of like the equivalent of what we do in the sources tab, but it's all digital, obviously. And then the annotations tab, the analog for that would be like in the old days, we used to, write down quotes or evidence on note cards and maybe put them in stacks. And so the annotations tab lets you see all of your evidence, your notes, your highlights, et cetera, kind of in a more granular view. And we built that because we had teachers and librarians asking us, hey, it's great that students can tag their articles to organize them in the sources tab, but can you actually do something to help them see and organize their evidence? And so the annotations tab actually lets you do that. And then we also have a bibliography tab, which houses a bibliography editor where you can generate a bibliography with a couple of clicks really quickly and easily. And the reason why it's able to happen sort of fast and easy is because, again, with everything being under one roof, when you are early in the process and you're capturing articles, let's say on the web, we automatically extract that citation information from those articles like you saw in the video. Therefore, when you're downstream in the workflow and you're creating your bibliography, we know the citations associated with each of the sources that you've curated in your library. And so we can basically allow you to click a button and automatically create the citation or bring the citation into the bibliography for each one of those sources. And then we also have an outline tab, which houses the outline editor. And again, you can drag and drop notes and highlights that you've made in your articles into that outline editor. We've actually recently added some features to that. But basically, you can drag and drop bullet points around. It remembers the kind of the auto numbering. And whenever you add a piece of evidence from one of those articles into the outline, again, because we know where that evidence came from, we can automatically update your bibliography in the background. So it's kind of nice that everything's sort of integrated and works in sync that way. We even have a papers tab where we embed the Google Docs viewer or a link to the Word Online viewer. And what that all means is that for the student, everything's organized in one place. But what it also means for you all and the teachers that you work with is that basically it becomes really easy for you to be able to jump into a student's library and see all their work along the way. And so when you create an assignment in Scribble, and that assignment library gets created and students are saving their work for that assignment to that assignment library, all the different components of their work are in each of those tabs for that assignment library. And you as the educator and multiple teachers or teachers and librarians can actually become co-teachers, if you will, for that assignment. And you'd have the ability to jump into and see a student's library to see all those different parts of their assignment that they've been working on, anywhere from the beginning of the assignment when it's been submitted or distributed to everybody to the end when it's actually handed in by the student. And so you kind of have this unprecedented access in real time to be able to see the student work and dive in and sort of redirect students that might be struggling or falling behind or heading down the wrong path. So now that you sort of know that, then I think the analytics probably make more sense because you can see that we're able to pull information from all these different places the students are working in the workflow and be able to sort of aggregate and abstract that up into the data and analytics that you see here. And the goal here is really to try to empower you with real-time data so you can make better decisions about who to spend your time with, to see where students are, who's falling behind, et cetera. So for example, in this research paper assignment, we can show you how many students are on target and off target for different steps in the process. So how many students have started the research or not, started the paper or not, or met certain goals that you might have had for the assignment, like the number of citations or words in the paper. So really at a glance, you can see where everybody's at. And more importantly, you can identify, hey, maybe these are the 5 kids that I need to spend more time with because the paper's due in 3 days and they haven't even started the research yet. We also have data at the individual student level. And you can see here that we can show you that Jordan has 6 articles that she's collected. She's met the first goal of having 5-cited sources on her way to meeting the goal of having 1,000 words in the paper. Susan's a rock star because she's all in the green and she's already turned it in. And Kara here still has a lot of work left to do. All things that you want to know sooner rather than later so that you can help them course correct in case it's getting late in the game and they're falling behind. And again, that's part of our philosophy. It's like, if we can give you this data, you can make better decisions about how to spend your time and who to spend it with, particularly when you're thinking about how to spend that time in the limited, precious sort of face-to-face time that you might have when you're in the classroom with them or when they're coming to the library. And I think that's an interesting way to think about how this can help, change the way that you spend the time with students that need help. Earlier I said, oftentimes what's been done historically is that there's kind of a more of a cookie cutter approach where you sort of decide, I'm going to spend 5 minutes with every student on their annotations or their sources or whatnot. And the reality is you might want to spend 0 minutes with Susan and 10 minutes with Kara instead of 5. But the way things have always been, if you don't have access to great information about where they're at ahead of time, you only learn that once you've sat down and sort of misallocated the time. And so part of what we're trying to do is help you see that ahead of time, maybe during prep period or when you have some downtime, and that gives you the ability to kind of plan better for when you are face to face with the students. A lot of this data here is around progress tracking, like I've been talking about. This last column is a little bit different. It's actually about the sources themselves that they're curating. So, we're compatible with a lot of the databases that are out there as well. So Gale, EBSCO, Britannica, JSTOR, and whatnot. And what's nice is that when students are saving information into Scribble, we can actually automatically categorize the information that they're saving into some major buckets. So we can show you, are they using those databases that you're paying for and you're wanting them to use as credible sources of information? And if so, which databases? Or are they just Googling it and getting it from online? And if so, what kinds of open web resources are they using? So in this example, if I was in the actual app and I hovered over these different pie slices, you'd see that 2 of these articles came from government websites. One's a Wikipedia article, which obviously might be a no-no in terms of quoting from a credible source. 2 are coming from academic websites and so forth. And so it really gives you kind of high level view of being able to see roughly the credibility and diversity of sources that they're using. And I'd say this is early work that we've done in the realm of media literacy, but we have a lot more planned, right? We've got more things planned where we want to be able to help students develop judgment around source evaluation. And so, we'll give you that update when we've got more to show there. But yeah, so that's kind of the analytics piece. And then, this slide is for all the folks out there that are used to using the Microsoft world, used to working in that world. Like I said earlier, everything you saw in the video that we do for Google users, we do for Microsoft users as well. And at some point, we're going to be launching a Microsoft Teams integration as well. So keep an eye out for that. And then, of course, we're partnered and integrated with these platforms. And so if you're using any of these things, then, that makes it easier to bring Scrible into sort of the digital environment and the workflow and the tools that everybody's already using in your school. Most folks, when they think about Scrible, their mind immediately goes to sort of humanities and English, which makes sense. And there's nothing wrong with that. We love working with English teachers. But I want to make sure I leave you with not too narrow of a view of what you can do with Scrible. And I think probably Emily's presentation will speak to that as well a little bit about how they're using Scrible, hopefully across disciplines. But, just to point out a couple things, you could use us in science. And sometimes the way you use us in science might look like the way you use us in English, where you're writing a paper with evidence. But sometimes you might have something like a science fair project where there's no paper deliverable at the end of it, right? And what that means is that you can use everything in Scrible and maybe ignore, for example, the Google Docs add-on, or maybe even the outline editor, because you can still use all the other tools to help you, gather background information for your project, so you can become knowledgeable about the subject area of your project. As a student, you can, organize those articles, you can annotate them. And way back in the day, a long time ago, when I was in high school, I remember that when we created a poster presentation for a science fair project, you had to paste a bibliography on there. So if you still have to do that these days, you could still use all those capabilities in Scrible to help you with that. So anyway, the nice thing about Scrible is that it's not a single purpose product where you just sort of use it only for writing English papers, right? At the core, there are a set of content curation, annotation, and collaboration tools, and you can use those in a bunch of different ways. And so you can take just what you need. And in this example, for example, you might use everything except the things that are specifically really designed for paper writing, like an outline editor and the Google Docs add-on. But you could use the rest of it and still get a lot of value from that. The other thing is, people know us for kind of the research and writing process. That's what we lead with. But there are folks that'll say, hey, like, we don't do a lot of research or writing, let's say maybe in younger grades for whatever reason. But we do see the annotation tools, and we see them as being really helpful for close reading and text analysis. And so we have folks that might be just using the annotation tools in that way. So for example, and there's some specific reasons for that, right? So one is that we've got these really rich annotation tools that work across web pages and PDFs. That's because we built our own PDF viewer that works in the browser, but we've also kind of cracked the nut on being able to do web annotation well. Since the .com boom, so for like 20, 25 years, right, there have been a lot of people that have tried to make web annotation work well. And I'm proud to say that I think despite lots of folks trying and not having a great user experience, we have a novel algorithm under the hood that lets us do it in a much more robust way than anybody's done it before. So it just works much better. And it's nice that you can use one platform or one tool to be able to annotate content from both places, particularly if you're looking at online databases and things like that, right? Because you can actually just use one tool to gather information from both databases as well as online resources. The second thing is that we allow for real-time concurrent collaboration. So just like in Google Docs, where you can have multiple people editing the same document at the same time, in Scribble, you can have multiple students actually co-annotating at the same time, synchronously. You don't have to do it synchronously, but you can. And so we've been told that that can be really helpful for doing something like small group text analysis in class in groups of 3 or 4, whereas normally, that would be really clunky. And what that means is that, Johnny might be highlighting something and Billy will add like a comment and Susie will reply to it, and everybody's seeing each other's changes in real time. Just a much more dynamic kind of modern experience for doing something like that. Third thing is that unlike traditional or even newer literacy apps, like, we're not a content provider. So we're not saying, hey, you should use Scribble because our content is better. We're agnostic. We say, hey, if you've got a literacy app out there and you like their content, you can bring it into Scribble. You might have a PDF on your desktop you can bring in. And there might be other sources of information that you can grab from. But you kind of have this great flexibility to sort of design, reading lists or exercises around content from different places. The fourth thing is the ability to quickly generate and share out texts. So In the video, you heard about the concept of a library. I talked about that in the context of an assignment as an assignment library. And you can actually create a library and then invite the entire class to it. And that turns it into a class library. And you can then basically quickly curate articles from different places. And all the students in the class that have been added to that library would immediately have access to it. So it's a quick and easy way to kind of essentially distribute like a reading list, for example. And then the last thing about the product that I'll say is that we've also built these sort of assistive features as well. So read aloud translations and definitions. And what's interesting about this is that these are not new features in the world. Like you've probably seen these things before, but we've kind of built them and integrated them with everything else we've already built. So you have the ability to have some new experiences that people haven't seen before. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to kind of explain that in detail, but we actually have a blog post about that we can share out afterwards, or when Emily's presenting, I can even put it into the chat here, that really talks about what these features are and why they're unique and different in Scribble and what we've done to kind of make them a little different than how you may have seen them in other places. And last thing I'll say about this is that we built this originally because we had special ed directors and educators reaching out to us and saying, hey, annotation really helps students engage with the text, but can you please build these capabilities? And we did, but we built it with a universal design for a learning mindset. And what that meant was that there were other applications that ended up coming out of it as well. So you could use it in ELL, you could use it in world languages, and we've seen some other applications for it as well. So refocusing on research and writing, basically, I think what we've built is pretty broadly kind of applicable because these are the kinds of modern skills that we're supporting that students need these days. Certainly if they go off to college, whether you're going to be writing term papers or knowledge economy jobs where they might be creating things like market research reports and RFP responses and grant proposals and things like that. And so having the ability to kind of see the world's knowledge, boil it down to the important parts, gather that evidence, organize it, and be able to make a good case with it. That's the kind of information-based writing that I think has been really emphasized lately, and is something that really kind of helps them for what they're going to be doing in college and beyond. I think I've talked about this a little bit, but our grades and subjects that we typically are best for are sort of secondary humanities and general science, but we do have folks using us outside of those areas. And we do have folks actually using Scribble in late elementary as well, and we can talk about that if that's of interest. But these are the kinds of particular projects or programs that you may have going on in your schools and your districts that we plug into very nicely and that we support. And then these are the kinds of initiatives, typically at the district level, that we also support really nicely. The personalized learning part, I think, is probably obvious. It's pretty obvious to a lot of you, but it's because the data, the analytics that we provide give you the ability to kind of make decisions about how to support different students based on where they are in the process. And that can help you kind of personalize the instruction and the intervention. And the college and career readiness part is important because we've done something with Scribble that's a little different, where when students graduate from high school, if they've been using Scribble with you, when they graduate, they can associate a personal email address with their account, and they can take that data in their account with them to college. And we've had a lot of educators say, thanks for not abandoning our kids when they leave us. It's nice that they can continue to use Scribble for their college courses when they're there. So I'm going to just spend maybe a minute talking about this, and then I'm going to hand the mic to Emily. So, this is a big topic and probably something that would warrant maybe its own webinar or its own discussion. But I did want to talk about kind of how we think we can help or how Scribble can help with one of the major sort of anxieties that's emerged in the last couple of months, right? So many of you may have heard about it or used it yourselves, but there's this new kid on the block called ChatGPT, and it is it's causing a lot of it's making a lot of noise, right? So there are people who are really impressed with this AI chatbot, and there are other people that are terrified by it. And there's some people like myself who are both like in awe and a little terrified of it. And I think the part that's relevant for our discussion here is that, there's a lot of folks that are looking at how well ChatGPT is able to generate novel text and worrying that students are basically going to be using it either in part or on the whole to generate, papers or parts of writing assignments. And so there's this concern about what I'm calling AI cheating in writing assignments, where teachers and librarians are worried, like, how are we going to know whether the student actually did the writing or if the AI did the writing? And there's folks out there working on AI detection tools, and I think the jury's still out on whether or not those are going to work well or not. We certainly know so far that some of the classic plagiarism tools like Turnitin were not able to really pick up effectively, whether or not it was written by ChatGPT, and that's because of the nature of the writing. So I won't go into too much detail there, but it's been pretty widely reported that classic plagiarism tools don't catch text that's been written by generative AI tools like ChatGPT. So there's this anxiety, and I think the thing that we can offer and contribute that helps is this idea that when you use Scribble, and certainly when you use it well, the way that Emily and her school has done, students are actually, as they're using the Scribble, are able to sort of generate essentially research and pre-writing artifacts, right? Because we help them through Scribble, curate their research articles, annotate the evidence in it. We're gonna have a paraphrasing feature in the future that helps you see that students actually did the work of rethinking and recasting the text that they're looking at. They can use tags to organize what's in their library. They can generate an outline. They can generate the bibliography. And so there's a lot of work that's being done by students, and they basically are leaving sort of a breadcrumb or footprint trail of all the work that they've done. And as a result, we have the ability to help you see that they've actually done the work, right? That there's evidence of authentic work being completed. And as a result, what we're able to provide, I think, is something that we've always done in math, which is in math, you always say, show your work. And in writing, typically folks have always focused on the end work product, meaning what's in the document. But the reality is, as we all know, there's a lot of work that happened before the final paper is handed in. And through Scribble, students are able to show their work like we do in math for the writing process. And so I think if you're using Scribble, you have a way to kind of release this or mitigate this anxiety and this concern because you have evidence of the work being completed. And the last thing I'll say is that it's not just about that, which is the kind of the compliance piece of the discussion where, it's like, well, you could use one of these newfangled tools that might be out, or you can use Scribble as a compliance tool to make sure the kids actually did the work. That's kind of a compliance argument. I think the other thing that we can contribute is to say, there's a difference between saying, hey kids, don't take the shortcut, don't do the wrong thing. There's a difference between saying, don't do the wrong thing and saying, hey, don't do the wrong thing. And by the way, here's a set of tools that we can give you that will actually help you do the right thing, right? Which is we actually want you to go through these steps so you can develop the skills around critical thinking related to the sources, the arguments you're making, the paper you're writing, et cetera. And so I think what's nice about Scribble is that it's not necessarily just a compliance tool in this new problem area that's emerging, but it's also a way for you to help students feel comfortable doing what you're asking them to do, which is not to take the shortcut. And I think as a result, you kind of remove a little bit of the incentive of taking that shortcut. So that's something new that we're talking a lot about, we're thinking a lot about, and you'll probably hear more about it from us in the future. But that's kind of like a very quick way that I wanted to talk about how we think we can help with this kind of new emerging concern that people have. So I talked a little longer than I wanted to, so I'm going to basically stop my screen share now and be very happy to hand the mic to Emily, who's going to tell us all about how they've been using Scribble.
All right. Can you see my screen? Perfect. Okay, so I'm Emily Leonard. I'm the Library Media Specialist at Menomonee Falls High School. And to say that we are obsessed with Scribble at Menomonee Falls High School is truly not an understatement. Like, we love it here. We use it across all content areas. Like, our kids basically live in Scribble, and Victor said, like, it's a really comprehensive app, and like that is truly what it is. Like, it's really comprehensive, and it's just amazing. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through our journey with Scribble and how we're using it, and then some of the benefits that we've seen at my school. So we first started using Scribble in the spring of 2021, and we ran a pilot just with the English classes here. So we started with 2 sophomore classes, a junior class, and a senior class, and we got really, really positive feedback from the English teachers. So then in fall of 2021, we did a full staff rollout. So I met with all of the staff in my building at one of our in-service days, and I walked everyone through, like math teachers, science teachers, everybody got the full rundown on Scribble. And again, like, super positive feedback. Everyone was really excited. And right off the bat, I mean, within a day of having done that at an in-service, I had all of the freshman social studies classes scheduled to come down to the library, and the senior healthcare academy capstone. So that was all scheduled right away because everyone was just very excited about this app. So why we use Scribble? Prior to bringing Scribble to MFHS, very few people outside of the English department required citations. So everybody was doing research projects, like, you know, in science, they would have them make a poster on heart health or something like that. You know, in social studies, they were doing research on, I don't know, contemporary issues, things like that. And really, there were no citation requirements. Like, it was kind of the Wild West. Everyone's just like, put your information on a poster. The classes that I did work with on research, we spent so much time because students would find an article in the database, the bell would ring, and then they would lose the article and they couldn't find it. And they like had no idea where it was. They couldn't remember which database they were in, which search terms they'd used. So then we would spend the next class period trying to hunt down these articles. So that was a lot of time too. And then additionally, a lot of my instructional time when I met with classes was specifically on how to create a citation. So, you know, we were doing things pretty much by hand. Like, here's how you find the author. This is what it needs to look like. This is what needs to be italicized. The period needs to go here. And we were spending so much time on that. And we were spending more time on citations than we really were on sources, which in my opinion is really the opposite of how it should be. We want to be spending more time on getting good quality sources. So I just have a screenshot here. This is an example of one of our good social studies teachers and what they required for their works cited for this psychology project. So as you can see there, it was just a link, which we all know is not a citation. So that was pretty bad. Since we've adopted Scribble, we have seen much improved source attribution, and really, like, the teachers truly understand now, like, how easy it is to just give proper attribution. And so they're using it, like, everyone's using it. It's truly been a big help with just organization. Like, research projects are so much easier to organize because we are using Scribble. And I'm going to show you a couple screenshots of how we make that happen. We get to spend more time teaching research skills, which are super valuable. And then time savings, like Scribble is a huge time saver for the kids. So it's just really great. I don't have on here, but Victor was talking earlier about the analytics that the teachers can see. And that's huge too. Like, I was just actually working with classes yesterday and today, and we had that as an exit ticket. So at the end of the period, you need to have 2 sources saved in your Scribble library. And so we were really easily able to go into the teacher analytics side and see, okay, yep, you have 2 sources saved, you're good. You do not have 2 sources saved. What happened? And so we use that a lot too, very heavily. So I'm going to take you through just our Healthcare Academy capstone project, just because that was such a big one. So seniors in the Healthcare Academy have a really big research project that they do. It's a 15 to 25 page research paper that they have to write, which is like, not a lot of high school students, I think, get that experience. So it's a really big, daunting task for them. Before we brought on Scribble, we spent 1 block on research, and then we spent 1 full block on citations. And so, I mean, it was taking a full 90-minute block to go through the citations because they had to do everything pretty much by hand. Not to mention, like, organizing the papers that they had printed out, and I mean, just all of that. After they got started on the research, we then did citation check-ins, and that was just for me to work one-on-one with the students to make sure that they had done their citations properly. And then the final piece of it was I was grading the works cited page. So I was combing through every single citation to make sure that the citations were done properly. And that's what we were doing with the teachers. And it was tedious and very time consuming. This is an example. And even though you're doing these things, you're doing check-ins, you're working with the kids for a full period, this is an example of one of the works cited pages that was turned into me. So they used APA instead of MLA. Here's another one. They had 1 hanging indent, and then they abandoned the hanging indent. I don't know why. So that's the kind of work that we were getting until we launched with Scribble. So now the way that we do the project is we spend 30 minutes getting all the kids set up on Scribble. And at this point now, the seniors this year had already been introduced to Scribble last year because it's so integrated at every grade level, like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, they all have to use it. So we spent just 30 minutes getting in the classroom library and talking about like the more advanced organization features that they needed to use for this project. And then we were able to spend 2 full class periods focused on research skills, finding quality sources, evaluating evidence, all of the skills that they need to have, especially if they're planning to go to college or university. We were able to spend so much more time on that rather than the citations. And then when I did check-ins with the students, just because there's such a time crunch, I really only get to do 1 check-in per student. I was able to focus that on sources and research. So I was able to sit down with each student to check in on the sources that they had found, how the research was going, rather than checking in on their works cited page. And then finally, we were able to grade based on the quality of the sources used, because Scribble did the citations for them. So it was very easy. And honestly, we were seeing like the quality of sources that were used since we've adopted this it's increased so much. Like they are using much better sources because we're able to spend so much more time on it. And so that's been really great. This is a screenshot of an example that I pulled from one of the capstone students of just how they were able to organize their Scribble library. And what I have like highlighted in yellow are the annotation tags that they were using. So, all of the students for this project, they were able to create their own annotation tags, but then there were certain ones that they needed to use. So they needed to use background information, cause and effect, all of those different things that went into their research project. So using those annotation tags really helped keep the healthcare kids on track with this project because it is such a big project. And so that was amazing. And then I also have a screenshot on there of how a teacher can add an annotation key, which is really good for scaffolding. So if you're working with freshmen and sophomores who maybe aren't as organized or they haven't done, research projects like this before, the teacher can actually create an annotation key. So they can say, if you're highlighting in yellow, that means that it's the main point. If you're highlighting in blue, that means that it's whatever. So those organization features are just really huge for the teachers and for the students as well. The big thing we've been pushing this year is the Google Doc add-on. So I have here a screenshot of a teacher was using her own research organizer, and she wanted the kids to take the information that they found in their research project and put it into her research organizer. And the Google Doc add-on lets the students do that so easily. So they can just, launch the Google Doc add-on and they'll see all of their sources on that Google Doc page, and they can select which quotes or which annotations they want to insert into the Google Doc. So that makes it really easy for the students to fill this out, and it makes it easy for the teacher to see like what sources have they found. And then she also had them do source summaries, which I thought was really good, right? Like, so then we're proving here are the facts that I read, and those have been inserted automatically from Scribble. And then they have to summarize that, which requires a little bit higher order of thinking on the student's end. So, that was really good. Feedback, I just threw some quotes on there because I was asking, teachers like what they thought. Scribble is a research game changer. I had a teacher tell me that, and I truly believe that it is. A student had talked about how great group work has been with Scribble. It really, because it does allow them to do group work together, and so that's been really good. And then the annotating feature has also been very popular with the students. And I actually today, I didn't put it on here because I was just with classes today, but I was working with the health classes, so 10th grade health students, and we were doing the Google Doc add-on for their research project on nutrition. And I showed them how easy it was. Like, here's how you can insert all of your annotations. And I had a kid shout, "Oh my gosh, I love this!" And it was like, you don't usually see that level of excitement from 10th grade boys, but whatever, he was excited, and I was excited that he was excited. So it was really good. And Scribble's just been a really good experience, and it's really changed how I collaborate with teachers here. There's just a lot more collaboration that we do, and research has been a bigger focus, and more people care about adding proper citations, which is always a good thing. So. All right.
Thank you, Emily. That's amazing. I always think that the actual feedback from actual using institutions is compelling, and I think your story is like really compelling as far as the Scribble's utility in the school.
Great. Well, I love that. That was great. Actually, Emily and I did this kind of a presentation a few years ago, and I feel like I've learned new things about how you all are working there. I'm really happy to see that it's being used so widely across grades and different areas. That's great. I had a couple updates that I wanted to share. So I feel like maybe I should, kind of give you folks some updates on what we've been working on, some new things that are out there. Let me share my screen again, and I can dive into that. All right, so there we go. So some updates for you folks. First big one is we actually launched Scribble for iPad in December. And that's been a long time coming. It's something we've been wanting to do for a very long time. I think many folks may know that, we had been built for and optimized for basically laptops and Chromebooks, for a very long time, and had been wanting to be able to support tablets, specifically iPads. And it's a pretty heavy lift to actually get from kind of a desktop experience or a laptop experience to a touch experience on a tablet that has two orientations, and you can pan and zoom and all that kind of stuff, pinch zooming and whatnot. But we did it. So we worked on that pretty long and hard last year, and we're finally able to launch it in December. So if anybody watching this recording later actually, you're using iPads, know that we have something for you now. And the experience is actually very similar once you get it set up to what we do for example, Chromebooks and laptops, where there's actually a browser extension for Safari on the iPad. And so you would just tap on that extension on your iPad like you would click on the extension button, let's say in Chrome on your Chromebook, and it just works the same way. How you get it set up on the iPad is a little bit different, because in order to add an extension to the browser on an iPad, Apple actually sort of deploys that through what they call an app, but it's not really a full-fledged kind of classic app that houses all the work inside the app, like you would have, for a lot of kind of classic apps. That app that you basically add, really its only goal is to basically add the extension to your browser. And so, your work is still all getting stored and saved in the cloud in your online account online, so that you can actually log in through the browser and see all that stuff. But all that's been optimized for, touch and being in the browser. So that's a big deal. And if you are using iPads, I would say you can certainly use us, in secondary, which is where we've kind of historically focused. But if there are folks, out there that do use iPads in elementary, even though I would say Scribble, the interface isn't really optimized for elementary, this gets us one step closer to being able to get used in late elementary. So if you are using iPads in late elementary or in elementary, which is what we see happening a lot across the country, you now actually have the ability to at least do something with Scribble on an iPad with, let's say, 4th and 5th graders. And we do have plans to actually do something in the future that would be really optimized specifically in terms of the interface for elementary school students as well. So, stay tuned for that when we've got that. Second thing is that we've just made a lot of sort of small and medium-sized sort of UI and user experience improvements. I'll just give you one example. It used to be that when you launch Scribble, there's a toolbar and a sidebar that popped up, and you could drag, I think, the toolbar, but you could not move the sidebar. So we've now changed it where you can toggle the toolbar to go from the top of the screen or the bottom of the screen, and you can toggle the sidebar to go from the right or to the left. And that sounds like a small thing, and it kind of is, but the reason why it's important is sometimes when you're using Scribble, you don't want that stuff to be covering underlying content. And so this gives you the ability to kind of move it out of the way. But there's like a lot of little things like that, little improvements to how things look, how they work, little fixes here and there that we've made, improvements to some of the way that things look. So just know that's all in there. It's probably not worth going through, a lot of those in kind of a laundry list way, but just know that we've invested a fair amount of time. It just makes it smoother, easier to use, more consistent, etc. Third thing is, many of you may have seen that, we developed last year how-to guides. So, those have been sort of updated and expanded. And there are new kind of videos now, which people have been asking us for a very long time. So we've added a whole bunch of how-to videos. And so now we call that resource how-to guides and videos, where in one place you can actually see both things. And I can share my screen in just a minute and show you what that looks like. And then the new thing that we've built but haven't launched yet is item number 5. So those of you that have tried Scribble or will try Scribble, you'll notice that when you first come in, we give you what's called a getting started tour. It's an in-app tour, which means that when you come into the app, it basically will highlight part of the interface, and there'll be a little box that talks about what it is, and you can click next, and it'll show you the next element in the interface, and it'll talk about that. And then basically there's a few steps, and you click OK, and you're done with that particular tour. So we've had that in the library, and we're actually working on revamping that library tour. But what we didn't have that we've added, but we haven't released yet, it'll probably be out in the next couple of weeks, is actually the same kind of experience for an in-app tour for essentially all the capabilities in the toolbar and the sidebar. So Emily, you probably don't need it at this point since you folks have been using it so much, but for your new students that come in, you can actually just have them quickly go through that new toolbar and sidebar tour, so they can basically just see what all the buttons in the toolbar do and what all the tabs in the sidebar do. And so that's there as well. Or that'll be there out there soon, as soon as we launch that. Item number 6 is, some of you may have seen, if you've been signed up for Scribble, we've started doing a new thing, and Karen's really taken the lead on this, of Tip Tuesday emails. So, I think one of the things that we have in Scribble is that we have built a lot of things in there, right? That's kind of the point, that we are doing everything under one roof. So we've really built like 3 to 5 apps worth of stuff, or 3 to 5 tools worth of stuff under one sort of super app. And so you've got the citation capabilities and the annotation capabilities and the curation capabilities and the bibliography thing and this thing and then that thing. There's a lot of stuff there, and that's great because everything's under one roof. But there might be a lot of things in there that you are not aware of. You might have missed the feature, or you might not know how to do something in particular. So what we're doing now is every Tuesday, we're sending out what we're calling a Tip Tuesday email, where it's very brief. The email is usually meant to be just a paragraph or so. And then it links to a help article that shows you how to do something specific. So, how to edit the name of a source, because sometimes if you grab a PDF from the web, it might have a nonsensical name associated with it when it's in your library. So how can you change that very quickly and easily? How can you, one of the things we've asked people to do, because that's really helpful, is to make sure that your browser extension for Scribble, your Scribble extension is actually pinned in your browser, so it's visible, so you remember to use it. So just like small things along the way that will help you get the most out of it, and maybe help you realize, something that you didn't know was there before. Number 7, and this is really just me talking about it at this point, but there's things that we will probably be doing in the future to, help you more with this whole kind of ChatGPT and AI conundrum that I discussed. And there's a lot more to come. We've got a lot of other interesting things, kind of in the mix. But yeah, those are our updates, that we're kind of working on new things, and we've got new folks on the team like Karen who are available to help you. And maybe I'll let Karen, if you want, just say a couple of words about your role and how you're new to the team, but what you're helping and hoping to help people do.
Okay, I'd love to. My name is Karen, and as Victor mentioned, I'm new. I've been here just a little over 2 months, and I'm a 22-year educator. So I know where you're coming from an education standpoint. I've taught several things across the curriculum, from music, chorus, German, to English and ESOL and ELL. So I know how much something like this is needed. I just finished my master's degree, and I told Victor when I interviewed, I wish I'd had this when I was going through my master's program. So I'm here to help you figure out how to use Scribble more efficiently. And also, because I'm a teacher, I know a lot of the things that you guys need, and can help you to relate those to Scribble and show you how Scribble can work with all of the other things that we're using, the learning management systems like Schoology, Canvas, or anything that, Google Classroom or anything like that. I'm available every day for private one-on-ones or group one-on-ones. I'll be following up with an email, and my contact information and schedule will be available. So anytime you need any help or assistance, I'm glad to do it.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it's great, because we always want to be able to provide more help and support, and Karen's really here and available to do that, which is fantastic. So I guess with that, Jeff, I'll stop and see what you want to do next.
Thank you, everyone. I think all presentations have been super informative. I would encourage anyone watching, anyone who came live, anybody who's watching the recording, do reach out. Feel free to reach out to me or the co-op team here at WiLS. Victor is always happy to be reached out to too. I see Karen nodding, so she's probably saying, sure, reach out to me as well. I don't want to speak for Emily, but Emily's so friendly. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer questions that anybody has from a user perspective too, or a school perspective. So that's it. I mean, I think we've had a really great hour here. And we will we'll wrap up for today. And thanks so much for watching. Thank you to our presenters, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you.